Most people don't misunderstand you, they sense you, and that's what makes them uncomfortable. The night you finally understand yourself isn't soft. It isn't peaceful. It doesn't arrive with clarity and candlelight. It arrives like a quiet accusation, like a mirror you didn't agree to look into, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. You've been strong for years, composed, reliable. The one who absorbs tension in a room and stabilizes it. The one who doesn't overreact. The one who gets it. But what if that strength wasn't strength? What if it was armor you forgot you were wearing? The night it happened for me, there was nothing dramatic about it. No fight, no betrayal, no crisis, just silence. It was 11:47 p.m. The kitchen light was still on. The house was dark except for that single yellow glow over the counter. A half-finished glass of water sat beside my phone. No notifications, no emergencies, just stillness and an unfamiliar feeling rising in my chest. Not sadness, not anger. Recognition. Earlier that evening, someone I cared about had said, gently, "You're always calm, but I never know where you actually are." They smiled when they said it. It wasn't an attack, but it landed like one, because I knew exactly what they meant. If you've ever been the one who sees everything but says nothing, you already feel this. I walked to the sink and stared at my reflection in the window. The glass was dark enough to show my face, faint and distorted. I looked steady, controlled, even confident, but I couldn't answer a simple question. Who am I when I'm not managing everyone else's emotions? That question doesn't sound dangerous until you try to answer it. For years, I told myself I was emotionally intelligent, that I was grounded, that I was above unnecessary drama. I prided myself on not reacting impulsively, on being measured. But here's the uncomfortable truth no one tells you. Emotional control can become emotional avoidance, and avoidance feels mature, until it costs you intimacy. That night, I replayed moments I had dismissed. The time I let a comment slide that actually hurt. The time I agreed just to keep pace. The time I withheld how deeply something affected me because I didn't want to seem too much. Each memory felt small, but stacked together. They formed a pattern. A man who mistook invisibility for stability. Woman might call it mysterious. A friend might call it low maintenance. A colleague might call it professional. But underneath, it was fear. Not fear of conflict, fear of being seen fully, because being seen means being measured. And being measured means possibly being found. Lacking. Some of you already know exactly what I mean. There's a hidden cost to being the composed one. People admire you, they rely on you, they trust you in chaos. But they don't always feel close to you, and one day, you realize you've built respect, but not connection. That's a lonely trade. Around midnight, I sat down at the kitchen table. The chair felt colder than usual. I remember pressing my palms against the wood surface just to feel something physical, something real. I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. When was the last time I told someone what I needed? Not what I thought, not what I observed, not what I analyzed, what I needed. The silence that followed was heavy, because the answer was, I don't remember. Strength had become performance. Calm had become strategy. Insight had become shield. And here's the part that stings. No one forced me into that role. I chose it. Somewhere along the way, I decided that being needed was safer than being known, because if they need you, they won't leave, right? But is that actually connection, or just utility? That question unsettled me more than any argument ever could. There's a moment, and it's subtle, when self-awareness shifts from pride to exposure. You realize your patterns aren't personality, they're protection, and protection has weight. The clock turned 12:16. A.m. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the kind of small domestic noise you usually ignore. But in that stillness, everything felt amplified. I imagined what it would look like to show up differently. To say, that hurts to say, I need reassurance, to admit, I'm not as unaffected as I seem. It felt risky, almost irresponsible, as if dropping the calm would destabilize everything. Who would I be without the steadiness? Who would respect me if I stopped absorbing tension? And deeper still, if I stopped managing the emotional temperature in every room? Will anyone stay? That was the real fear, not rejection. Replacement. Because when you've built your identity around being the stable one, vulnerability feels like stepping off a platform with no guarantee of solid ground. But here's the shift that began forming that night. Maybe the reason I felt unseen wasn't because others failed. Maybe I trained them to see only the edited version. And that realization doesn't make you a victim. It makes you accountable. The night you finally understand yourself isn't about discovering hidden greatness. It's about confronting hidden strategy. It's about recognizing that your calm might be courage, but it might also be concealment. And once that thought enters your mind, it doesn't leave quietly. It grows, because now you have a choice: continue performing strength or risk being real. But what does real even mean when you've spent years perfecting composure? That question didn't resolve that night. It lingered. And the unsettling part: the more honest I became with myself, the more I realized this was only the surface. There was something deeper underneath the calm. Something older, something I had learned long before I had language for it, and I wasn't sure I was ready to touch it yet. You thought the realization was the hard part. WASN single quotes T. The hard part is tracing it back, because once you admit your strength might be armor, you have to ask who taught you to wear it, and that's where things get uncomfortable. The morning after that kitchen table night, nothing looked different. Sunlight came through the blinds at 6:32 a.m. The coffee machine gurgled like it always did. My phone lit up with emails. Life moved forward as if nothing had shifted, but internally, something had cracked. I kept hearing that sentence: "I never know where you actually are." It echoed in the most ordinary moments. While brushing my teeth, while tying my shoes, while responding to messages with my usual measured tone. And here's the strange part: I realized I had no idea where I actually was either. If you've ever been praised for being easy, steady, or low drama, you know how seductive that identity can be. It earns approval. It makes you valuable. It makes you safe. But safety built on partial truth becomes isolation. That afternoon, I drove to meet a friend at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. For 18 p.m. late enough that the lunch crowd had cleared, early enough that dinner hadn't begun. The place smelled like roasted beans and warm bread. Soft music hummed in the background. We sat by the window. Sunlight hit the table between us. Halfway through the conversation, they asked me something simple: "So what's been going on with you lately?" A normal question, a basic question, and I felt it again. That internal scramble. My instinct was to deflect, to summarize, to keep it light, but instead, I paused. Too long. They noticed. "You okay?" they asked. And in that microsecond, I felt two versions of myself collide. Version 1, composed, articulate, slightly detached. Version 2, unsure, exposed, not fully in control. I could almost feel my nervous system choosing. And for the first time in years, I didn't default to calm. I said, quietly, "I don't think I actually know what I've been feeling." The words sounded foreign, heavy, almost embarrassing. They leaned back slightly. Not alarmed, just attentive. "That's honest," they said. Honest. The word landed differently than praise ever had, because honesty carries risk. It doesn't guarantee admiration. It doesn't guarantee control, but it does open something. We sat there for nearly an hour, and I said more than I normally would. Not dramatic confessions, not emotional breakdowns, just small admissions. I get tired of being the stable one. Sometimes I wish someone would push back. I don't always feel as unaffected as I seem. Each sentence felt like stepping into cold water, uncomfortable, awakening. And here's the dark edge no one warns you about. When you stop performing strength, people don't always respond the way you expect. There was a brief flicker in their eyes. Not judgment, but recalibration, as if they were adjusting to a version of me they hadn't catalogued yet. That moment shook me more than silence ever had, because if you change, the dynamic changes, and dynamics are fragile. Have you ever noticed how people unconsciously prefer you consistent, even if that consistency limits you? The composed one stays composed. The caretaker keeps caring. The rational one doesn't get overwhelmed. When you break pattern, it forces others to confront their own, and not everyone likes that. Some of you already feel this tension in your own life. Later that evening, I sat in my car in the driveway, engine off, windows cracked, streetlights humming above. I didn't go inside immediately. I replayed the cafe conversation in my head. I had been honest, but I also felt exposed, and that exposure came with a question I hadn't fully faced before. If I'm not the stable one, then who am I in this relationship? That's the identity crisis no one talks about. When you've been emotionally competent for so long, you forget you're allowed to be uncertain, and uncertainty feels like weakness when your identity is built on steadiness. But here's the insight forming underneath the discomfort. The need to be the stable one didn't start in adulthood. It started much earlier. It started in rooms where emotional chaos was unpredictable. It started in moments when reacting made things worse. It started when being calm earned safety. The armor wasn't random. It was intelligent. It protected me when I needed protection, and that realization softened something inside me, because you can't resent a strategy that once kept you safe, but you also can't keep using it when it's costing you connection. That's the shift. Gratitude for their armor without living inside it. But even that awareness brought a new fear. If I let people see more of me, what if they don't like what they see? What if my needs feel inconvenient? What if my emotions disrupt the very balance I've worked so hard to maintain? And deeper still, what if I don't actually know how to express myself without overcorrecting? That's the danger zone. When people wake up to their patterns, they sometimes swing to the opposite extreme. From silent to explosive, from composed to chaotic. I didn't want that. I didn't want to become unrecognizable to myself or anyone else. So the tension tightened. How do you evolve without destabilizing everything? How do you reveal yourself without demanding the spotlight? How do you remain strong without remaining hidden? Those questions followed me into the night. And then something unexpected happened. Around 9:40 p.m, my phone buzzed. A message from the same friend I met at the cafe. Hey, I appreciated what you shared today. It made me feel closer to you. I stared at that sentence longer than I care to admit. Closer. Not weaker. Not unstable. Not disappointing. Closer. That one word challenged years of internal programming. Maybe vulnerability doesn't reduce respect. Maybe it refines it. But here's the unresolved tension that lingered. If one honest conversation could shift something this quickly, what else have I been holding back? And more importantly, why? There was a memory beginning to surface, older, sharper, that explained more than I wanted it to. A moment from years ago when expressing myself didn't lead to closeness. It led to distance, and I had quietly decided back then never to risk that again. I hadn't fully revisited that memory, but I could feel it moving closer. Waiting. It's strange how a memory can wait for years. Silent, patient. Until the moment you're finally strong enough to face it. That older memory I felt circling me. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slammed doors. That's what made it dangerous. It taught me something quietly, and I built a life around that lesson. I was younger, early 30s, different city, different relationship, the kind where you're still trying to prove you're solid, reliable, worth choosing. It was late, maybe 10:15 p.m. We were sitting on the edge of a bed in a dim apartment bedroom. The lamp on the nightstand cast a soft orange glow. Outside, traffic hummed in the distance. I remember feeling restless that night, unsettled. Something had been building in me for weeks, small frustrations, small disappointments. Nothing explosive, just accumulation. And for once, I didn't swallow it. I said, carefully, I feel like I'm always the one adjusting. Not accusatory, not loud, just honest. There was a pause. Then came the shift, a sigh. A subtle eye roll, and the sentence that shaped more of my life than I realized. I didn't know you were this sensitive. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't even shouted, but it landed like a verdict. Sensitive. In that moment, I felt exposed, not understood, assessed. And something inside me recalibrated instantly. Don't do this again. Don't bring this up again. Stay steady, stay easy. If you've ever opened up and immediately regretted it, you know the feeling. The way your chest tightens. The way you promise yourself you'll handle it internally next time. That was the night I quietly chose composure over expression. And here's the part that's hard to admit. It worked. There were fewer conflicts after that. Fewer uncomfortable conversations. I became easier to be with, more agreeable. More contained. But what I didn't notice was what I was trading away. Fast forward to now, sitting in my living room, lights low. That memory fully resurfaced. It was around 11:02 p.m. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The house felt still, almost watchful. I replayed the bedroom scene in my mind, and for the first time, I didn't judge my younger self. I saw him. He wasn't weak. He wasn't overly sensitive. He was trying to connect, trying to clarify, trying to matter. And when that attempt was subtly dismissed, he adapted, because adaptation is survival, but survival strategies don't always expire when the threat disappears. That's the dark edge of emotional intelligence. You become so skilled at reading rooms, anticipating reactions, managing perceptions, that you forget to check whether the danger is even still there. And here's the uncomfortable question that surfaced. How many current relationships are shaped by an old moment that no longer applies? How many people are you protecting yourself from who never asked you to? Some of you are realizing something right now. It wasn't that one comment years ago that defined you. It was your interpretation of it. I made sensitive mean unacceptable. I made expressive mean risky. I made needs mean burden. And then I built an identity around being unshakable. Strong. Self contained. Low maintenance. But that identity had a shadow, because when you suppress irritation, you also suppress joy. When you mute disappointment, you also mute excitement. When you dampen emotional intensity, you dampen connection. The armor doesn't discriminate. It protects you from pain. And from closeness. That night, as the rain intensified, I felt something I hadn't allowed in years. Anger. Not at that person from my past. At myself. Not destructive anger, not explosive, but a clean, clarifying anger. The kind that says, you deserve to be heard. I stood up and walked to the window. Streetlights reflected in the wet pavement outside. I could see my faint reflection again in the glass, older now, steadier, but still carrying that old decision. And I asked myself something sharper than before. Who benefits from me staying emotionally edited? The answer wasn't what I expected. It wasn't others. It was me. Staying composed meant staying in control. Staying in control meant never risking humiliation again. But control is lonely. Because when you're always in control, you're never fully met. And that's the turning point of this night. The night you finally understand yourself isn't about blaming the past. It's about recognizing the contract you made with it. A contract that says, I will not expose myself like that again. And maybe that contract once kept you safe, but are you still living by it? Here's the deeper tension that surfaced next. If I start expressing more calmly, clearly, honestly, will old labels return? Will someone eventually say, you've changed? And if they do, is that proof I'm wrong? Or proof I'm finally visible? That question lingered heavier than any memory. Because growth doesn't just threaten others' expectations. It threatens your own self-image. You've spent years being the composed one. What happens when you allow yourself to be complex instead? Not chaotic, not unstable, but layered. Strong and expressive, calm and intense, grounded and emotional. Can you hold both? That's where the real evolution lives. Not in abandoning strength, but in expanding it. And as the rain slowed, another realization formed, quieter, but more powerful than the anger. People who are meant for you won't shrink when you expand. They might be surprised, they might need to adjust, but they won't disappear simply because you stopped performing. And if someone does retreat, then maybe they were attached to your role, not your reality. That's a hard truth, but it's freeing still. There was one more layer I hadn't touched yet, because understanding the origin of the armor is one thing. Actually removing pieces of it, that's different. That requires action. And action means risk. Tomorrow, I would have to test this new awareness in real time, not in reflection, not alone at night. But in conversation. And that's where the real challenge begins. Awareness is private. Change is public. That's the part no one prepares you for. You can understand yourself at midnight. You can trace patterns. You can forgive your past. But the real test comes the next time someone looks at you and expects the old version, and you feel the choice rise again. The moment came faster than I thought. It was 2 days later. Late afternoon. 5:36 p.m. The sky outside was fading into that muted blue before evening. I was standing in the kitchen again, same counter, same yellow light, when a familiar tension surfaced in conversation. A small comment, casual, dismissive in tone. Old me would have smiled. Slightly redirected, kept the air smooth. I felt the script forming automatically in my head, but this time, I paused. Not dramatically. Just enough, and I said, evenly, when you say it like that, it actually feels dismissive. The room didn't explode. No one stormed out, but the air shifted. There it was. Exposure. The microsecond where your Heart beats louder and you wonder if you just destabilized. Everything. They blinked, surprised. I didn't mean it that way, they replied, and here's where the old contract would have kicked in, immediately reassuring them, minimizing myself. Instead, I stayed. I know you probably didn't, I said. But that's how it landed. Double quotes simple.com. Unedited. Silence. Followed. 5 seconds. 10. Long enough for discomfort to exist without being rescued. And then something unexpected happened. They softened. Okay, they said quietly. Thanks for telling me. That was it. No rejection. No labeling. No you're too sensitive. Just adjustment. The relief that moved through me wasn't loud. It was steady, grounded, like something clicking into place after years of being slightly off. Here's the truth that hit me in that moment. The night you finally understand yourself isn't about becoming someone new. It's about stopping the quiet betrayal of who you've always been, because every time you swallow a feeling to maintain an image, a small fracture forms inside, and fractures accumulate. You don't notice them at first. But over years, they become distance from others. From yourself. If you've ever felt respected but not truly known, this is what creates that gap. That evening, after the conversation ended and the house settled again, I didn't feel dramatic triumph. I felt integration, strength without concealment, calm without suppression. And for the first time in a long time, my body felt aligned with my words. But let's not romanticize this. There's still risk. Not every person will respond with maturity. Not every dynamic will adjust smoothly. Some people prefer the version of you that requires less from them. And when you stop over-functioning emotionally, others sometimes feel the weight of what they've been avoiding. That's the hidden cost of growth. It reveals imbalance. And imbalance forces decisions. But here's the difference now. I'm no longer performing stability to guarantee belonging. I'm offering authenticity and letting belonging respond. That shift changes everything. A few nights later, I caught my reflection again in the dark kitchen window. Same angle, same faint outline. But this time, the question wasn't who am I when I'm not managing everyone. It was quieter, can I trust myself to show up fully? And the answer, not loud, not grand, was yes. Not perfectly. Not constantly, but intentionally. Because understanding yourself isn't a one-night epiphany. It's a threshold. You cross it once. And then you keep choosing it. Some of you are standing at that threshold right now. You've built a life on being capable, reliable, controlled. You've mastered emotional restraint. People admire you for it, but deep down, you feel the cost, the subtle loneliness. The sense that people love your steadiness, but don't fully feel you. So let me ask you something that might stay with you tonight. What part of you have you edited for approval? And what would happen if you stopped? Not recklessly, not dramatically, but honestly. The irony is this: the strength you've been protecting is actually strong enough to survive being seen. You don't lose power by expressing impact. You don't lose respect by naming a boundary. You don't lose depth by admitting need. You lose connection by pretending you don't have them. The night you finally understand yourself is the night you realize your armor was brilliant, but temporary. And now, you get to decide which pieces you still need. If this resonates, it's not because you're fragile. It's because you're perceptive. You've felt the tension between composure and authenticity for years. You just didn't have language for it. Now you do. So I'm curious, when was the moment you realized you were performing strength instead of living it? Not the dramatic version, the subtle one, the quiet contract you made with yourself. Share it if you're ready. Someone reading your words might recognize their own. And if you're walking this path of quiet self-confrontation, not loudly, not for applause, but deliberately, then this space was built for you. Stay. Not to consume, but to continue becoming someone you no longer have to edit.